Hi, welcome to the My Curious Mind podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Rulo. And before we get started with this episode, I just wanted to let the fans know that we have merch. Yes, we do. We have merchandise. We have shirts. We have hats. We have hoodies. We have mugs. And we're working on actually socks. So, yes, if you're interested in buying anything My Curious Mind, all those proceeds go towards the podcast to help the podcast grow. You can check them all out on our website that will link in the bio. Also, you have the opportunity to get memberships through the website. What memberships do is that one, it helps the show grow, but two, it gives you perks on special episodes, free merch, anything My Curious Mind, you will be the first one to know through that memberships. Speaking of memberships, I want to give shout outs of members of the month, Jacob and Benjamin Sykes and RJ Durham. They bought memberships, working on getting their free shirts and their free merch, and they have all the latest episodes without delay. Finally, if you want to be on the show, please make sure that you email us at mycuriousmindpod@gmail.com. And finally, if you're on Spotify, make sure you hit that follow button to keep up to date to all things My Curious Mind. Without further ado, enjoy the episode. And we are live. How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Doing good. Getting through Christmas with the kiddos. So
There you go. That's the way to do
I
it.
know you got a young one too. So
Yeah.
but how was Christmas for you guys this year?
Great, man. We what is it? I think I told you I'm from Ohio originally.
Yeah.
So we drove back to Ohio for a few days, spent time with my side of the family. We came back in town for Christmas Eve and just getting ready for New Year's now, man.
Yeah. So what brought you to Illinois? Like, kind of go back to like where growing up, where from out in Ohio you are, and like how'd you get here in Glen Carbon, Illinois?
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally born and raised outside of Cleveland, Ohio, small little farm town.
Go Browns.
I know, right? That's what I'm saying. There you go.
That were horrible this year.
It is what it is, you know. But anyways, so yeah, right outside Cleveland, Ohio. Went to undergrad in Ohio. Got my master's in Pennsylvania, and I was an athletic trainer before I became a chiropractor for quite a few years. I worked with the Browns, colleges, high school teams. I did another semi-pro football team out in Ohio as well for quite a bit of time. Just wanted to do more, be more the decision maker, if you will, be the guy who makes the call with treatments and whatnot. So I went to chiropractic school, and there's a school out in Missouri called Logan, which is in Chesterfield, right outside of St. Louis. Went through there, but when I was out there, I met my wife, who's originally from Edwardsville. And so when we got together, we got married. I said, hey, let's go to California. And she's like, no, we're staying here. So here I am. So I've been here ever since.
Yeah, sometimes the women win, man.
I tell you, definitely, man. Yeah, for sure.
That's about 99% of my arguments. I'm like, you know what, you're let's do these.
Yeah.
but no. So lead me through the process of like what it takes to be an athletic. You said you're an athletic trainer first. Take me through the process of like, one, what it takes to be an athletic trainer, and then what do you do once you're an athletic trainer? Because I know there's a lot of kids that, for instance, like my football guys, they see our athletic trainers do it, but they don't necessarily know the work it takes to get there.
Oh, yeah. It's changed a lot since I was in school. So originally when I was in school, and this was like 2009, early 2010s, that area, you had to go to school for a 4-year degree in sports medicine. And then you'd have rotations. So like one semester you'd be with like a track and field team. The next semester would be football, women's basketball, that kind of thing. And after that, you'd have to take, after you got your degree, you'd have to take a national board certification exam called the BOC. Once you pass the BOC, you're now an athletic trainer. You can work in high school, college, everything like that. But nowadays, they're requiring everyone to get a master's degree. And so now you have to get a master's degree to sit for the board certification exam. And that took effect about 2 years ago, I think, is when that was the mandate to say you have to start doing that. So now every athletic trainer, unless they're grandfathered in, they have to get a master's degree in sports medicine, basically doing all the same things as an undergraduate would do. Go through your rotations, do your board exams, that kind of thing. So it's a very intensive process. It's very demanding. You need to know the ins and outs of the human body, how to respond to emergency situations on the field, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, athletic trainers, they really know their stuff. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, we have two really good ones at Collinsville, Miss Amanda and SI.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at the Collinsville holiday tournament, the Prairie Farms holiday tournament.
Oh, yeah.
And they were like, we had a kid get injured, and my guy SI, he was there and he was like diagnosing it, and he was like, he literally guessed it right on the head. I was like, I don't know how. He's like, I think he has a fractured fibula. I'm like, how do you know that? Like, from just examining it. Sure enough, the kid went to get X-rays, and that's exactly what it was. Like, and then I told him, he's like, man, he goes, he acts like it was a good guess. I'm like, dude, you knew. Like,
Yeah.
how do you, like, they're like wizards. It feels like they just can get pinpointed right on the thing. So in your tenure, have you feel like knee injuries? Like, do you feel like they're increasing? Because I feel like when I was a kid, I never heard of anybody getting like major knee injuries, and now it feels like every year, like, and watching NBA, watching NFL, like, it's like every kind of big name player goes through like a knee injury, and I don't know if that was the same when it was back when you started. Like, what kind of has that been like, or have you discovered like it's getting more and more and more, and if so, why?
It's much more prevalent nowadays, for sure, and it's usually two factors. One, a lot more athletes will play on turf fields, and turf fields have no forgiveness whatsoever. So, like, for example, let's say you're playing soccer and you're doing a quick lateral turn from one direction to the other. On grass, that grass would actually shift as like you're sliding across the grass, picking up some of the physics behind it, if you will. While on turf, that turf doesn't move at all. So something has to give. And usually it's the knee with the ACL in that respect. Another one, too, is that a lot of the strength and conditioning programs have changed significantly since back then. I mean, way back whenever we were in school, it was always squat, deadlift, bench. Like, those are the core three, and they still are to this day. But a lot more kids are not focusing on like the strength that they need. It's more on like the quickness, the endurance. And you need to have solid hamstring and quadricep strength to really make sure that knee stays stable when you're doing those quick movements. Because if you don't have the strength, something has to go, and it's always usually the ACL or the meniscus. So it's always those two factors that we see. A lot of the research is backing it up too.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you a proponent of like no turf fields? Like, do you like, I'm not making you have to go to this political like no turf fields like that, but are you saying so you think it'd be way more beneficial if people would just maintain grass fields instead of turf fields?
If you want to prevent injuries, yeah, grass field's the way to go. Yeah. But I also understand why people do turf fields, because the maintenance cost is none, right? You don't have to water it. You don't have to reseed it. It's just there. So that's the big thing that is always that determining factor for school or an organization wants to go turf or grass. If they're going to save money, they're going to pick turf any day of the week.
Yeah.
But if it's going to help prevent injuries, then they're going to pick grass.
Yeah.
So it's always, which do they rather deal with, if you will.
Yeah. And I think the big thing, because when I played at Jerseyville, we had grass fields, and I don't think we had any. And I might be wrong. My one buddy always got injured, but it was always just like something his body just built weird. But we never had any significant knee injuries. But I felt like we were always like, the grass wasn't like maintained enough to like it. I feel like people were still getting hurt other ways just because the maintenance wasn't good on the field, even for grass. But they got turf now, and but I'm way out of there, so I don't know their injury if it spiked. But it definitely seems like, especially at the pro level, like you can hire people to not have, like, every pro team could not have turf and get away with it.
Yeah, like, I'm pretty sure, and maybe you know this more than I do. I know for a fact Cleveland Brown Stadium still has grass field. I don't know if any other NFL team has a grass field necessarily, but I know Cleveland does. And whenever they report their end of the year stats on like injuries, Cleveland's always usually one of the lowest ones, just because of that grass field.
Yeah.
So that's a huge component to it. Now, from what you said with like maintenance of the field, that's huge too. I remember when I played high school ball, we were in a playoff game, and the field was grass, but there was like potholes everywhere. And so people were twisting their ankles left and right. So it is like you still got to maintain the field, but if you maintain it, injuries just go down significantly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something that I have ankle issues, and this is because I'd be running and all of a sudden boom, there's a hole there, and now I'm like, oh, like I always played through it though. It was probably my stubbornness too that has kept me for ankle problems. So you went through you were a athletic trainer, and then one day where you were just all like, man, like did you go to a chiropractor and you're like, man, I would like to do that, or was it just like where did your love for like the study of how the spine works and how we bend and how we kind of live everyday life, was like, okay, that's what I want to do, that's what I want to educate people?
Yeah, great question. So with an athletic trainer, there's a lot of red tape because ultimately the team physician or the team doc has the final say about what the diagnosis is, what the treatment plan is, and you essentially, as the athletic trainer, have to follow their orders. So even though athletic trainers know a lot, they could come across a doctor who doesn't have that exact specialty or have as much knowledge in, like, let's say, a knee injury or elbow injury. But since they have the degree, they have to follow their rules. So I started immediately looking for different avenues of how I wanted to go down. Like I initially thought like the orthopedics route would be a great way. So getting in my medical degree and doing all that. I thought about physical therapy as well. But I was also doing rehab with one gal in a clinic back in Akron, Ohio. And she worked for a chiropractor. And I hurt my back at the time because I was lifting weights, and she was always like twisting my arm, like saying, "Just go see my guy, just go see my guy." And at the time, I didn't trust chiropractors at all, um, to my ignorance. Now that I am one, if you will. But anyways, and so at the moment, so I was just like, you know what, fine, I'll do it, whatever. Just get off my back, I'll go check him out. I went and saw him. His name's Dr. Jason Sorelli, great dude. He's out in Hudson, Ohio. Um, I saw him, talked to him. He treated me, and I got like instant results. And what was a big eye opening with that, because I was about 26, 27 at the time, and I had an MRI that had a herniated disc. And the doctor came in, didn't even look at me, just looked at the MRI and said, "Where do you want to schedule surgery?" And it's like, let's pump the brakes here, man. Like, I'm only 26, 27. I don't need this invasive surgery. This should be something else that's out there. So I went to physical therapy, didn't get any results. I went to this chiropractor. He incorporated chiropractic with rehabilitation exercises, and it was like a light bulb that popped in my head. And I was like, okay, there's something to this. I should learn more. And so as I was talking with him, he was telling me that chiropractors are considered portal of entry healthcare providers, which means you don't need a prescription to go see a chiropractor. You just walk into their office and say, "Hey, I want a new patient exam," the whole 9 yards. And they got full autonomy. So what that means is I'm licensed by the Board of Medicine here in Illinois. So that means I have the same status as a regular medical doctor here in the state of Illinois. I can make the call. I can do X, Y, and Z, the whole 9 yards. So that was really appealing to me. Is like I can stay within that sports medicine realm while still having the autonomy of a doctor and making the call on the sidelines. So I was like, to heck with it. We're just going to go full on board on this. I looked around for other schools. I found Logan in St. Louis. I applied, got accepted, and moved out here, and the rest is history.
Yeah. And so one thing you said was you were 26 and they were pushing surgery. Something that I think you told me, or when we introduced with the Cougars, what you said is like, my goal is to try to prevent you from getting big surgeries. And so, do you think that's something that people don't do enough? Is all like, hey, especially with the back and the spine, is like, hey, go see your local chiropractor first and see what they say, or like, do you think a lot of big surgeries can be avoided, or kind of walk through that scenario of trying to avoid major surgeries per se?
Yeah. I always tell folks, especially when it comes to back pain, 95% of your back pain cases do not require surgery. That's what the literature is saying. That's what my experience is saying. That's what my training is saying. Now, a big thing about that is that a lot of people, when they get back pain, they hear the word disc bulge or disc herniation, they freak out to a certain extent. So they go to their primary care doctor who doesn't have that training in rehabilitation or sports medicine per se. So they send you to the orthopedist or the surgeon and they say, okay, let's cut you open, because that's how they're trained. And it's nothing against them. They're all great clinicians, but that's just their training. They don't know any better, if you will. So whenever we find patients with back pain, and it's not just back pain, it could be neck pain, elbow pain, knee pain, whatever, if you will, we avoid surgery as much as humanly possible. Some cases, it's inevitable. It has to happen. It is what it is. But there's about a 95% chance that whatever you have going on does not require surgery. So that's always a really good thing that we can rest assured is that, like, if we're at a Cougars practice and we have someone with an ACL repair, a lot of the research is saying nowadays that you don't need that surgery if you strengthen your quads and you strengthen your hamstrings as well. So a lot of the new stuff coming out is really pushing the aspect of like more conservative care, more physical therapy, more chiropractic approaches, rather than just going straight to underneath the knife or getting an injection or anything like that. Because that's not going to necessarily fix the root cause of what's causing your issue.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what draws me to like chiropractor is like the way, I don't know, I kind of try to think about like what did we do before medicine and how did guys get healed before medicine? And it's like just kind of a more natural approach. Like obviously you use technology. Technology's nice, it helps us out. But and I was 25 at the time and I hurt myself and I'm not like a professional athlete, so I don't like have and I'm all like doc helped me fix it, and like naturally it was all like, hey, like if we do this, it can work if you just kind of put in the work. And that's kind of, I think that's some things is like surgery is a way that you don't have to put in the work, but you end up having to put in the work more because now you have to recover from surgery. But yeah, I've been going to I started going to a chiropractor when I was in elementary school. I've had three really, including you, three really good chiropractors. Dr. Stephanie Monroe, Justin Hamill out of Carrollton. That's my dude. He helped me get through high school and college, and then obviously you. And something that I love that you did, and they may not have done it because I was a kid in high school, is all like you love to educate. Like you're all like, hey, this is for my training. Like you kind of try to make everybody a little bit more of a chiropractor every time they come here. Is that something that like uh, one one I could tell it excites you, but two, is that something like are you wanting to make sure everybody knows like, hey, this is what you're getting yourself into. This is the information. Like here's your choice, or like what did the like? Because some people they come in, it's like okay, crack you, all right, have a good day. But you're like, no, I want to educate you, and like case by case, you put in the work to make sure people know one, this is everything that's going on. This is everything that is what's happening. This is how you can fix it, but we can do whatever you want to do. Like, is that something that like you're passionate about? Is like educating people more and more and more every time they walk in the doors?
Yeah, that's a huge thing for me in this practice. Doctor is Latin for teacher. So if I'm not teaching you or educating you about your condition, the pros and cons of treatment, regardless of whatever option you decide to go down, that's going to have a huge effect, not just short term, but also long term as well. So I always tell people, like, this is exactly what you're getting yourself into. Is it 100% that we could probably fix it? Maybe. Is there maybe a chance that we might not get any results at all? That's also a possibility. Having that honest conversation with every single person who comes into this office is going to be setting the stage for what's going to be moving forward. If we say, hey, it's going to take 18 visits, it's probably going to take 18 visits. If it's going to say we need to do all of this stuff, we need to do all of this stuff like traction, rehab, adjustments, the whole nine yards. So that's the biggest thing with our patients is setting the expectation. I can't tell you how many times I've had a patient come to my office and they'll tell me that like what you do is completely different. Like for an example, I had one gal come in here who just finished physical therapy, did like 5 sessions of physical therapy, and she was like, yeah, the therapist didn't tell me what my treatment plan was, what was going on with me, what I should be doing at home, anything like that. And to me, that's just mind boggling because it's like, well, how is this patient going to be able to take control of their condition in a way that's going to help them? I mean, even a lot of the research is coming out saying that if you educate your patients, their compliance to your treatment plan just skyrockets. So that's just another thing that we do here in our office that we really focus on our patient education and we invest a ton of resources into it to make sure that we bridge that gap between what's going on, what the outcome is, and so that you understand what exactly you have to do to put your effort into it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember my first visit. I'm all like, oh man, like he pretty much said like, hey, this is how you could do it. And it's not like, because some guys are like salesmen, like they want to sell their practice. Obviously, you want people in your doors, but you're just like, hey, like the choice is ultimately up to you, and you're like, no hard feelings either way. But this is in my studying you, and I like the whole you like maybe you videotape my squat, and you're like, hey, this is how this is like how your squat is. You're on your toes, so it makes your calves and your quads big, but it doesn't really help your back and spine and stuff like that. And I was all like, holy crap, like you just described my entire body. And I was in sweatpants. So you're like, you just described my entire body. So it was all like, so that for me, that was like, dang, like he's putting in that work. And if he's putting in that work for me, I know he's putting in that work for everybody that's walking through the door. So kudos to you for that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
And what's your because even though there is technology in this office, you still it's you. It's not like you have interns that come in every now and then, but for the most part, it's just you. What's your approach to like technology in the chiropractics? Like, do you think there's a use for it, but is there a use for like these big things? Like, is there any things that you would say, hey, chiropractors need to do this more? Like, the technology wise, like in the office, what do you think is essential? What do you think is kind of like BS?
Oh man, we can go down a rabbit hole with that one. So a big thing with chiropractors and the reputation that they get is that they overprescribe treatment plans. So what I mean by that is they'll say, hey, I need to see you 3 times a week for a year. And that's just malpractice to me, because that's just criminal in my mind. If you don't get results within 6 weeks of physical therapy, your diagnosis is wrong, or you're clearly not the answer for this person. You need to refer them to someone who is the answer. So that's the biggest thing with chiropractors that I have seen, is they have so much overconfidence in their ability, but they also overprescribe it because maybe the patient has a really good insurance plan, or they just know that they're going to just make some money off of them. And that's just a crappy way to practice. In our industry, we call those mills. So what that means is that you'll lay on a table, get adjusted, out the door, adjusted, out the door. It's just a revolving 5-minute appointment kind of thing. And I mean, it works for some people. They can do that. I'm still in the approach of like, we need to educate you. We need to do rehabilitation. We need to do a lot of things to make sure within those, let's say 18 to 24 visits that we have with you, we're going to get the most bang for our buck, if you will. So a big thing with what we do is with our clinic, we're a very low volume clinic. We see maybe 10 to 15 patients a day, but we spend 45 minutes to an hour with that one patient, not just doing rehab and everything, but we'll talk about their concerns. If anything pops up, what questions you got for us? And then that really helps out with the interns that we have in our office, because they want to go off and to do physical therapy or chiropractic or occupational therapy. So that's a really good way for them to kind of like, this is how I should be talking to a patient. This is how I should be approaching healthcare. This is how I should be prescribing a treatment plan, formulating a diagnosis. All of these things are going to help them, because right now healthcare is in a state of such profit first mentality and not human first mentality. And that has to change, and it needs to change day by day, but it's going to take quite a bit of time to get there. So to answer your question overall, overall, from a technology standpoint, we need to automatize everything, but slow it down to a point that we still give everyone that human to human interaction, and not just think of them as like, oh, you're just a dollar sign. Let's just get you in, get you out kind of thing.
Yeah. And so I've seen recently, like just from like advertisements, and it's usually small advertisements, because chiropractic, it's not like it's not like big medicine company where they're posting it on like the NFL. Like when you're watching NFL, you don't see a lot of things about people going to chiropractors and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But this use of the and you'll know the technical term for it, but like a red laser. Like, and like, what's your take on that, or what's your study on that? I just don't understand it. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. We actually got one about 3 months ago. Awesome. It's phenomenal. It's really, really cool stuff. A lot of the research is saying that what the laser does, it's kind of like, let's say you go to the beach, you get a sunburn. You know, sooner or later, you're going to peel off the skin and you're going to get a new layer of skin right underneath that. And that layer of skin tends to be stronger, more resilient to the sun, to the point that you don't burn, you more tan than anything. That's what the laser is doing. It's telling the cells in that area that's injured, we're going to kill off these old injured cells and replenish them with new, healthier cells at a much faster pace. So that's what the laser is doing. And it's really, really effective. A lot of the studies have looked at tendonitis, like Achilles tendonitis, elbow tendonitis, shoulder tendonitis. It's kind of unclear on like specifically back pain or neck pain, but a lot of those like arms, legs, tendinitises, it's golden for that kind of stuff. So we're real advocates when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like when we have a patient come in with Achilles tendonitis, we know exactly what to do and how we're going to treat it with that laser.
Yeah. My chiropractor, Dr. Hamill, he got it when I was in high school, and it literally, I think I had either a bulging disc or a slip disc or something.
Yeah.
And everybody was saying like, "Oh, you're gonna have to go get back surgery." I watched an older guy that did go and get back surgery at 17 years old. And he was like an old man, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like,
yeah.
I want to be able to still play sports effectively, especially football, because he couldn't play football ever again, and he was a really good football player. And so I'm all like, "Doc, can you fix me?" And he's all like, he goes, "Well, I can't promise I can fix you, but I can do my best to, like, this is my goal." So we went, and it literally like, it literally saved my athletic career. Like I could go play college ball, and it might not have been a slip disc or whatever, but whatever it was, that's what he did, and it was super effective. In college, this is crazy. So we would practice during the day, but like usually you lift in the morning and then you practice at night. For some reason, we'd have a 3-hour practice and we'd lift right after practice. And it would be like heavy lifts. And so I went like we're doing front squats.
Okay.
And so obviously you're already tired, so your form's going to be a little bit more sloppier than if you do it first thing in the morning when you're after breakfast, when your strength is at its fullest, because you haven't had to use anything strength wise. And so I was doing like, it was like 250. Like I was pretty strong. It was a pretty strong front squat. And they were like, I'm all like, man, I'm not feeling it. And how coaches are like, come on, push yourself. And I went like, going down felt good. And it was like the first 3 were hard and the fourth one going down felt good. And then when I got down, I'm like, oh, that feels good. And then tried to shoot back up, and then I just crashed.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And so they were thinking, I went to the doctors where I was at, and they're all like, yeah, you're going to be done. And I'm like, man, I don't want to be done playing football. I'm 22 years, or I wasn't even 20. I was 19 years old. It was like, hey, I don't want to be done playing football like ever again. And so I kind of went like against what they were saying. And I'm like, I'm just going to go back home and see my chiropractor. And he literally got me back that season.
Yeah.
They were like, hey, you're going to miss this season, probably next season. I'm all like, there's got to be a better way. My body has to be able to heal faster than that. And I got a lot of crap from like kind of the doctors there, and a little bit of some of the coaching staff was there, because they're all like, he's going home to see his own doctor, like he doesn't trust our doctors. I'm all like, I just want a second opinion. You know what I mean? Like if what they do works and I get back faster, doesn't that benefit everybody? And so that was like a week 3 injury, and by week 7 or 8 I was back in full form. Like it was amazing. I'm like, I thought I was done because they're telling me you're done for life. And then 6 weeks I'm back. Like it was it's pretty epic. So I'm very grateful for chiropractors, and every time something like within, especially the back area, because I mean that's your guys' specialties, or I'm like, hey, go see a good chiropractor, and if you don't have one, I have 3 I can send you to.
Yeah.
in my experience. And so what and you kind of hit on this when you were talking about like what the malpractice of things. Chiropractors have a very, very negative stigma. I think it's getting better, but it's definitely a negative stigma. So why do you think that is? You kind of hit it again, but if you could go a little bit more in depth into that, why do you think chiropractors, like something I've heard is all like, well, if you go see the chiropractor once, you're going to have to go see him again.
Yeah.
And so kind of dissect that. Like, why do you think that stigma exists?
So it originally popped up from our origins. So the founder of chiropractic, his name is D.D. Palmer. He was from Iowa. And his claim to fame is that he adjusted a janitor who was deaf, and after he adjusted him, he got his hearing back. Not sure how true that is, but that's where it all came from. And it came from the stem that the brain and the spine control everything. To a certain degree, they do. So their philosophy was that if you adjust the spine, it's going to cure all the ailments in the human body: diabetes, cancer, heart disease. And we now know for a fact that's just not the case, right? There are some folks who still practice that old school mindset. And so they still tell patients that that's the case, that's the case, that's the case. And it just takes one rotten tomato to spoil the whole patch. So that's where a lot of chiropractors still get that negativity. And they also still say that our profession is not evidence based. A lot of research, especially coming out within the last 10 to 20 years from the University of Pittsburgh, there's Duke University that's coming out with some really cool, good studies, saying that chiropractic alone with just the adjustment is good, but if you pair it with physical therapy, it's optimal then, which basically means you need one and the other to have a good outcome. One can't survive without the other, if you will. So a lot of clinics nowadays are really trying to pair physical therapy and chiropractic into one house, if you will. So that's the biggest misconception right now, is that from our origins, a lot of old chiropractors are still living in the past for how they're originally taught, and that's just how they're trained, and they're just not going to change. It's just the way it is with them. But these new folks who are coming out of chiropractic school, they are very much into the evidence-based. We are focusing on like treatment protocols that's backed up by literature. We're going to do what all that says. We're going to use rehabilitation in addition to our chiropractic adjustments to help you out. And then another thing too is that some people say that you need to get adjusted every single month, week, day of your life, if you will. I'm a little indifferent about that. The reason why is, like, if you have a normal, healthy spine, you don't need to get adjusted every single month. Now, if you have a spinal condition like a major case of scoliosis, it probably isn't a bad idea to get looked up at least once every month, once a quarter, something like that. So that's why I'm always kind of indifferent about it. I'm like, it's probably not a bad idea if you have like a severe case of like scoliosis or some sort of spinal condition. But if you're just a regular person who just had an ache and pain, once we get you out of pain, we strengthen the muscles that surround it. We probably don't need to see you as long as you continue to stay active, do all the things you know you need to be doing healthy, eat your vegetables, drink water, reduce your stress, all that kind of stuff. So those are the main focuses of why chiropractors get a bad rap. But to your point, it is changing, but it's a marathon. It's not going to be a sprint change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So and you kind of hit this on the head with where I'm going with this. So this is just a story that I heard. I don't know if it's true, but I'm sure it is because my mom said it. So, but I had an older cousin. When he was a baby, and they were going to put tubes in his ears, and they're like, "Well, why don't you just send him to the car? Like, why don't you just have him get adjusted and see what happens?" And it literally saved him from getting tubes in his ears. So that's kind of from the origin story. I guess that's kind of like, it does work case by case, but it's not like, hey, if you go to a chiropractor, you're no longer going to be blind. Like, so, but something that we did with our babies that kind of was everybody's like, why did you do that? We had twins, obviously, and crowded womb. And so when they were like of age to be able to do so, we took them and got adjusted and just wanted to make sure their spines were taken care of. And it like solved a lot of like colic. It just solved a lot of like sleeping issues that they had with their kids. Maybe I need to take them back because they don't sleep anymore. But that was something. And Dr. Stephanie, that's like her specialty is babies, and so we took them there and just checked them out. A lot of times we went there and they didn't even get adjusted, but it was just the fact that, hey, like my son was fell when he was a month old, and so that helped with a lot of like rehabilitation there too, because and babies, even though it sounds awful, they're made to bounce at that age. Just their bones are human bones are different.
Yeah.
But that literally, like, a lot of people who are suffering with like their kids not sleeping, like our kid, it was weird when they were like, yeah, our kid slept pretty much we woke him up to feed him. Like they're like, how did you do that? And we're like, well, we just took him to the chiropractor. Like it was pretty simple, like pretty simple thing. But is that something that like that you think is not necessarily necessary, but something you would recommend is like 3-4 month old babies, like, hey, maybe take them to the chiropractor, and maybe that like is that something that kind of goes hand in hand, like maybe it's growing, maybe it's whatever, kind of dissect that, like the baby's going to the chiropractor, I would say.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And that's actually a really new field that's emerging within my profession. Chiropractors can specialize, kind of like what you mentioned, in different aspects of medicine. So, like, there's a gal who's just 2 suites away from here. She's a chiropractor. She only deals with babies and pregnant mamas. I don't do that. So, like, we work phenomenal together. If I get a pregnant mama or a baby coming to my office, send them down the street. She has an athletic injury come into her office, she sends them to me. So, we have our own different domains of what makes us really great. Now, I'm not a specialist in babies, but I'm always going to say if we can avoid some sort of medication or some sort of shot that's not necessary, then I say, yeah, send them to the chiropractor who specializes in babies, and they'll be the perfect person to help you out with that kind of stuff. Because from what you're saying, colic, bedwetting, that kind of stuff with babies, I've seen it happen overnight just from like a one adjustment. And it's just fascinating what the research is saying about that kind of stuff. How just something as that quickly can basically reverse that kind of stuff instantaneously. It's just completely mind-boggling and so fascinating to me.
Yeah. And maybe because you're an athlete, you'll stick with athletes. But is that something you look to get into one day, or is it just like, hey, I got somebody good there, I'll just keep researching it from afar?
No, I don't have an issue with babies or pregnant mamas,
Yeah.
but that level of like physiology and anatomy is just completely out of my wheelhouse. And you really need to like take time to study that kind of stuff to be proficient in it. And I just don't have the time nor interest really. So I just send them to Dr. Sam and she takes care of all that stuff.
Yeah. So you've been a team doctor now for the Cougars and for a team in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you want to continue to do, like wherever the opportunity comes? Like is like kind of explain the role of like a team doctor, because I think they're kind of like when they think of team doctor, they're like, oh yeah, it's just the trainer on the sideline. Like what is kind of the roles of like being a team doctor of a team?
Yeah, great question. So typically, from an organizational standpoint, you have the chief medical doctor who is on staff. All right. So in your case, that's me. Typically, underneath that, we'll have like 2 associates, and then we'll have like 3 to 4 athletic trainers, if you will. Unfortunately, with the Cougars, we just don't have that big of a staff, so It's just me. I wear all the hats. So basically, what it is I handle the day-to-day injuries of every single athlete, and I also will provide emergency treatment right then and there if someone needs it. So let's say, for example, if we have a guy go down and he fractures his spine, what do we do? What's the protocol right then and there? Do we call the squad? Do we not call the squad? Is this something we can handle before we send him to the hospital? That kind of thing. So it's a very, very quick emergency process that you have to basically say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this, that kind of thing. We also are very adamant about preventing injuries as well. So that means that like during your guys' warm-ups, if we know someone who's having some aches and pains, we'll work them through some quick rehab exercises to get them all set up. If they have a certain movement that causes pain, we'll have them do a certain breathing exercise or a certain movement to help reduce that while they're working through their stances. We'll do taping, we'll do bracing. I'm sure you've seen people get their ankles taped before a game, that kind of thing.
Every time.
Yep, exactly. That kind of stuff. If someone's really concerned about like, hey, I've been having this shoulder injury, do you think it's safe for me to play? We'll make that call right then and there too after an evaluation. It's a lot that kind of goes into it, and I understand the mindset of like, you're just a trainer, you're just here to give me water. But to a certain extent, though, like we're also making sure that you're properly hydrated so that you don't seize out in the field or have a heat stroke. So it's very, very essential to always have a team doctor or some sort of healthcare personnel on the sidelines, because, I mean, you were there when we had the championship game. We had an ACL, we had a concussion, we had an MCL, we had a shoulder dislocation. We had like 4 injuries in 2 quarters.
Yeah.
So like it's just constant, urgent, emergent type of care.
Yeah, and like me rehabbing before the game because of my back and hip, like, and so yeah, there's a lot of hats you had to wear, but you you did it well. Um, so do you think for teams that don't have a team doctor, they should definitely it's beneficial for them to seek out one? I mean, obviously it's probably funding, but do you think like for teams that want to be put their players in the best position, like a team doctor and that sort of staffing, whatever it looks like, is probably the right way to go.
Yeah. I mean, if not a doctor, at least an athletic trainer at the bare minimum. You got to have someone on the sidelines. I'm really surprised that the league that we're in doesn't have some sort of rule that says you have to have a healthcare provider. At least the home team doesn't have someone on the sidelines. Because like there are times that we'll have opposing teams come in and I'll go across the sideline and be like, hey, I just want to introduce myself. Who's your guys' athletic trainer? And they say, you are. And I'm like, oh, you guys don't have one. Okay, got it.
There's sometimes we went on away games where you're the athletic trainer too.
It has happened. Yeah, it has happened. So that's the thing is that like it's really, really important to have someone on the sidelines. And I mean, another thing too, from like a recruiting standpoint for the Cougars, that really puts a peace of mind for a lot of people. Be like, I'm going to go to an organization that has a dedicated staff, a dedicated department in sports medicine. That if something happens, I know exactly that I'm going to be taken care of. That puts a lot of people's minds at ease when they have that reassurance that's going to be there.
Yeah, something that because the first year I was there, you weren't there, but then you jumped on the next year that I was there. It was like I was really bumming because I suffer if I don't get my ankles taped. Like there's probably a 70% chance I'm going to roll my ankle.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why that is, but and then that doesn't help me be at my best every single game. So knowing that you're like, hey, you bring the tape, dude, I'll tape you. And I was all like, heck yeah.
Yeah, man.
Heck yeah. So that definitely helped me out. And I'm not old, but getting older within athletics, not going to do it forever. Getting in that kind of mindset, being like putting my mind at ease, like, okay, like I can compete at a high level, not having to worry about my flipping. Because I mean, I'll walk outside, go to the mailbox and roll my ankle. It's just I don't know why that is, but it's just something that happens every now and then. But knowing like, okay, I can run and I can tackle and I can do all these things and that's something I don't have to stress about the entire game. Like, okay, when is it going to happen? It's more of a when it's going to happen than like if it's going to happen, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But so there's been, and if this is something that's maybe you're like that's a little bit too political and you don't want to go into that, that's fine too. But
sure.
There's been a very negative stigma going into like I don't want to just say medicine because I think medicine's good, but like kind of misinformation with kind of like people pushing things to get paychecks more than people pushing things to actually help people out. Did you watch I don't know if it's on there anymore, but Painkiller, the Netflix about just like how OxyContin was like brought on. Did you see that on Netflix?
I haven't seen that, but I've seen Dope Sick from Hulu. If you've seen that,
okay, I have not. I need to watch that. That's something that just is crazy. And you kind of said it earlier, like some guys are worried more about paychecks than they are people, and they're not people first; they're business first. Something that blew my mind, and I learned this when the kids are born, is that like hospitals are a lot of times, and maybe I'm not going to say all of them. I'm not going to just exploit all hospitals, but hospitals are a business.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's dollar signs and stuff like that. So, if you like dissect the whole, like, because you're one that's all like, hey, I don't want you to have to take pain medicine for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being 16 and I hurt my knee and going over and the doctor's all like, okay, we're just gonna give you I don't know if it was Oxycontin, but it was some sort of high like pain med that and my mom's like, he's never taken anything over a Tylenol, I don't think. And she's a nurse. She's like, I don't think that's the right move. And he's all like, it'll be fine. Like, he's a big guy, he'll handle it. And I was literally higher than a kite.
Yeah.
Didn't know where I was. But I knew one thing, my knee did not hurt. And so, so luckily I had a good mom who was in the medical field and was smart and was like, I'm not filling that prescription.
Yeah.
Like, you'll take Tylenol and you'll live with pain, one of the two. And so, and I, and maybe that guy had my best interest in mind. I don't know, or maybe he was just all like, "Hey, there's a chance where I can make $1 here. Let's do it." But kind of talk through that, like just the ignorance of kind of what people are putting in their bodies. Like, doctors not informing them, like, "Hey, this is a very big pain medicine that you might get addicted to." And if it wasn't for my mom, I might be addicted to it because I don't remember anything. But hey, my knee doesn't hurt.
Yeah, exactly. So just to be very clear, I've never met a doctor who doesn't care about their patients.
Mm-hmm.
It's just their training. So what I mean by that is that if you go to medical school, they're going to train you how to do surgery and how to prescribe medications. Like if you have diabetes, we're going to give you metformin for your high blood sugar, that kind of thing. They're educated on diet and exercise, but not to the level of like a physical therapist, a dietitian, a chiropractor, an athletic trainer, nothing like that. So whenever, if you were to have a conversation with a medical doctor, says, hey, this patient has back pain, they need to be getting up and moving around because that's going to help reduce their pain. They'll look at you like a five heads and be like, that doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain why? That kind of thing. So that's a big thing nowadays, is that like with that healthcare model is that, there's always a bad tomato in every patch, right? So that's going to just spoil the rest of the pot, if you will, too. But a big thing with all this is that the level of training that we give to some of these providers is really, really, it's tough to get everything within 4 years. So to give you an idea, for medical school and even chiropractic school, every single semester I was in school, I took at least about 30 credit hours worth of classes. And for those who haven't gone to college, that's 10 classes in an entire semester. And that's just a crazy amount of classes. And you go to classes winter, spring, fall for about 4 years. So really that adds up to about 6 years of training from a typical academic year. I've taken 30 credit hours from there on out. So you're getting just pump and dump information into your brain of so much stuff. And it's just these schools have to prioritize, okay, what are we going to expose these kids to? What are we not? Mm-hmm. So it has to start with the education of these new clinicians coming out of school. We need to prioritize what's going to be beneficial for them and then really educate them on the effects of these medications, like a narcotic, how it works and whatnot. To go on a little sidetrack, what makes these narcotics very addictive is that your brain has natural pain-killing chemicals already being present. So whenever you hurt yourself, your brain's automatically trying to reduce the pain. That's why, like, initially you feel the pain and then it slowly goes down. Now, what happens is that if you take an opioid or an Oxycontin, if you will, you just flood your system with so much of it that you don't feel it anymore. So then your brain's like, well, we already have so much of it, we don't need to produce any more. So then when those levels drop out, your brain's not producing any painkiller, you feel the pain again. So then you're like, well, crap, I need another pill. You take another pill, goes back up, rinse and repeat. And that's how we get that addictive behavior. So that's going to be the biggest thing, is educating our patients on like, hey, we do not really want you to take these as much as humanly possible unless it's absolutely necessary. Like if you had open heart surgery, yeah, take the medicine. But if you have back pain, no, you should not be taking it. And a lot of the research coming out says that it doesn't even really help out with back pain. It just turns off the fire alarm. So that's the big thing that we need to educate people on too, because they don't know any better. They haven't gone to chiropractic school or medical school, so they don't know. So that's why, like, it's really essential to educate your patients on what's going on, how we can help you, why we're doing what we're doing, and this is the outcome that we expect to see. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think just everything that's happened within the last 4 years, people are like just super, super like, when it comes to medicine, it's like I just kind of wish from like a personal standpoint, it would be less political. You know what I mean? Just because, and not even like saying I go one way or the other. I just wish like I feel like that should be a branch of itself that just works for everyone.
Yeah.
It should be like, I feel like it should be the best studies of like, hey, this is how the human body's working. And we necessarily shouldn't have to vote on it on a political level. Like, hey, this is where we're going. Like, no, whatever the smartest people that are, that have the best, like, definitely for people in mind too. Like, hey, if these are the people that care the most about people and they're the smartest, why are they not making the decisions? Like, But that's just a personal opinion that I don't know. But so one of the last things I want to cover is just what you do here locally, just for anybody that maybe is looking for a chiropractor or uh, that or maybe just is kind of hurting and needs a place that doesn't know where to go next. Like just kind of what you do here, where you are, stuff like that.
Yeah. So I'm the owner of Superior Chiropractic and Rehab here in Glen Carbon, Illinois. We're online. You can see our website, superiorchiropracticrehab.com.
And I'll post that in the bio for people.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. Anyways, our motto is we help active adults stay active, strong, and healthy without drugs or surgery. That's our big thing nowadays. And what we do is anybody who comes into our office, we have to do a new patient evaluation before we do any form of treatment. So first thing to do is to schedule a new patient exam. You can do it online, or you can give me a call. We'll schedule it that way. And it's a 2-day process. The first day is we collect information from you. You fill out all the necessary paperwork. We do an exam. If everything's okay, we'll do a little bit of treatment that day, and we'll let you go on your way. And the next time you come in with what's called a report of findings, we explain to you what's going on, how we can help you. We'll tell you what your insurance covers, what they won't cover. We'll let you make a decision. We just go from there. And then if we start treatment that day, and then we schedule it out and we go from there. Throughout treatment, we do progress reports as well. Usually every time we go from like a 3-time a week to a 2-time a week, we'll sit down and be like, hey, these are kind of what the numbers are saying to us. This is how far you're improving. I feel safe that we can start going down to 2 times a week or 1 time a week, so on and so forth. And then after that, we do a final progress report, and we'll show you the results from when you first started to where you're at now. And then I'll give you a recommendation if I feel like we need to see about a once a month adjustment, or if I say, hey, you're good to go, just call me whenever you need me. And we'll just kind of go from there. But a big thing that I really try to get all of our patients to really sign up on is we need to teach you exactly what's going on with your case, so that if anybody asks you what's going on, you can explain it to them at a 3rd grade level. That's our biggest thing. So that's our big mantra. We specialize in sports medicine just from my athletic training background. So I deal with a lot of athletes from the high school, the Cougars, the Olin River Dragons. We've seen some folks from the Blues. We've seen some folks from the Cardinals as well. But I mean, we'll accept a lot of people here in town who are avid weightlifters, just trying to stay active, that kind of thing too.
Awesome. Heck yeah. And this was just me picking up from the beginning. You said you worked with you have worked with the Browns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was an athletic trainer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Was that just like an internship, or what was that? Cool. Awesome. What years were that?
So I was at Kent State from 09 to 15. I was with the Browns in 11.
11.
Yeah.
I think the Rams are still in town then, so I might not have been following the Browns. So
maybe, I don't know.
So what I did with how I became a Browns fan.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we've talked about this, but like the Rams were my team, but they were always bad.
Yeah.
And so, but I went like we would go to any game we could. Not saying I had like season tickets or anything, but every game that we could go to, we went to.
Yeah.
And I love the Rams, even though they were bad. Like I followed the players, and I'm all like, man, we are really, really, really close to being really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when they got Todd Gurley, and then they signed Aaron Donald. And so like I'm all like, and their defense was amazing. We were still figuring out like quarterback stuff like that. And I'm like, man, we're really, really close to being good. I was like early middle school, early high school. So this is when I'm like really starting to love football and getting not just into like, oh, that's my team because my dad loves them, but like actually getting into like the X's and O's and like, hey, scheme wise, I love that we do this and this player does this and like that ability. And then there was rumors of them going to LA, and I'm all like, no, don't do that to me. Don't do that to me. Not now, because I know I'm all like, this team within the next 10 years is going to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I've followed them when they were bad. And my dad was a huge Rams fan when like Kurt Warner was here and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when they won, I'm like, don't do that to me. And early high school, they left and went to like LA, and I'm all like, this is what I was building up for.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people just followed him in LA, but I was all like, no, like when you go and watch games like every week, like that hurts you. Like you feel like you just got dumped by a girlfriend.
Right.
And so I'm like, I don't know if I can forgive him. And so, but then like everybody was kind of team hopping, like which team should I go? Like I liked the Titans for a little bit. I liked the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, I will never like Chicago. That just personal with Cardinals and Cubs and stuff like that. I'm like, I won't like Chicago. I do wish I hope Caleb Williams will because he's a good athlete.
Yeah.
I hope they get a good coach for him. But I'm all like, I don't really have a team. Like, I don't know. And so then I was thinking, like, you know what? You were with the Rams when they were awful, like 3-win season, 4-win season. Even when they won eight games, it was like, oh my gosh, we're good. So I'm all like, in my brain, I'm like, well, why don't we just look and see who's bad in the NFL? And like, so Cleveland, that was the year, I think they went 0-16.
Oh, that was back in 2017-16 area. Yeah.
And so I was all like, ooh, I kind of like them. And then I don't know if they got Myles Garrett the year before or the year after, but it was like right in that area where they got Myles Garrett. I'm like, well, he's a stud.
Yeah.
Like, well, I watched him in college. I'm like, he's a beast. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna jump on ship, and then that way I can just every Sunday I'm like, my team's bad, I can just enjoy football.
Yeah.
Like, I can just enjoy football. I don't really have a horse in the race. Well, then they got Baker Mayfield.
Ooh.
It's like, oh man, like I said, this guy is going to save the franchise. And so so that COVID year when we went to the Pittsburgh game that put him in the playoffs, and we were up in Cleveland, and obviously it was COVID, so it was a little weird. So I didn't get like the full Browns experience.
Sure,
it was limited, but I got the Browns experience because like literally for everything being closed, the city was on absolute fire.
Yep.
We stayed at a hotel within walking distance. They had like a bar down there, and it was like it was probably way past COVID packed, but me and my dad, I took my dad up there, and we decided we were gonna like that team, and he liked Baker Mayfield. So I'm all like, okay, we're good. Like now we're gonna start winning. Well, then Deshaun Watson came.
Yeah.
And I was all. I had kind of, I'm all like, well, he was good in Texas, or he was good in Houston with the Texans, but I'm all like, man, I really like Baker Mayfield. Like, that dude is fiery, and I'm all like, I think that whole situation was like, whatever, but I'm like, you know what, this is my team. I'm like, maybe we'll just stand behind Deshaun Watson. Then Baker went to the Panthers. I'm like, oh, maybe we made the right decision. Well, now he's with Tampa, and I'm all like, I wish we would have. My dad's a Tampa fan now, so he tells me every week, like, should have kept him.
Well, believe me, I keep telling myself that too. I mean, I remember it was I think it was the divisional round when we were playing Kansas City, when it might have been the AFC Championship game too. I forget. I think it was in 2020.
Yeah.
Whenever what's his name? Patty Mahomes got a concussion, and then the very next week he played.
Yeah.
I'd love to see the athletic trainer's decision making on that. But anyways, so I mean, he was on fire that year. Baker Mayfield, well, I think he was an MVP candidate at that point in time too. I mean, he was just phenomenal. Then the next year, he hurt his shoulder, and they're trying to get him to play with a hurt throwing shoulder.
Yeah.
I think he tore his labrum or something like that, and then they cut him.
The ball 50 times a game. I'm like, we have the best running back in the NFL.
Exactly. You got a 250-pound workhorse in the backfield. Just give him the ball. I mean, even his knee injury, what was it, last year? That was gnarly too.
Yeah.
Yeah. The total knee.
Yeah. Do you think the ankle is the overstrengthening of the knee? That's what I've heard rumors, like the fact that they spent so much time on his knee, that's why he hurt his ankle. But I'm like, I think he just broke his ankle.
I think he just broke his ankle. I mean, I haven't seen that bad of an injury since Willie McGinnis when he was in Miami, because I think he had the same injury. He tore every ligament, his meniscus. I mean, I don't even know where you start with rehab with that. That's just insane.
And they blame the tackle, but I think it was also they're playing on turf.
Wasn't it in Cleveland that he had that happen though?
I don't know. I thought it was in Pittsburgh.
It might have been. I don't know.
I don't know they probably have grass too, but maybe. It's like his cleat was stuck and his body was going one way and his knee just went the other way. But I'll die on the hill, and you watching the Browns probably will agree with this. Like healthy Nick Chubb, and they never give him 20 carries, which I don't know why they don't give him 20 carries a game. A 20 to 25 carry Nick Chubb is the best running back in the NFL.
Easily. Easily right now, yeah. I mean, I'm still thinking that he's still doing his final phases of his rehab, and they were just putting him in the game to kind of like, this is like your final phase of your rehab to see how well you respond with like high intense contact and whatnot. Next year, he'll probably be good to go and full go by then.
Yeah.
But But yeah, I'm excited to see him next year. The whole Deshaun Watson thing, man, it's tough for me to swallow.
Yeah, I agree. Even if it's fake, and I'm not like even whether that situation is fake, it's like there's a lot of like, hey, this happened, hey, this happened, hey, this happened, and it's like, why? Why do you want your franchise to be like that's the face that we got?
Mm-hmm.
Like now we had to go through it with Kareem Hunt. Like when we
Yeah.
signed Kareem Hunt, it's like, hey, he had this past, but now we're like starting to become that team that like, hey, if you have a criminal charge against you or like pursuing a criminal case whatsoever, come to our team. And it's like that's not the stigma you want.
Exactly. I mean, with Andrew Barry, I kind of understood what he was going because he was going to be the best GM in the league if the Browns won the Super Bowl with Deshaun Watson, or he was going to get fired. And right now, he's only trying to get fired because of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know if you know this within the NFL. I learned this when I was an intern. If they sign a player who is like has guaranteed money, and as you know, Deshaun Watson's contract's fully guaranteed. Jimmy Haslam, the owner, he has to write a check and it has to go into escrow for the entire amount. So he's already written the check. Deshaun Watson's already going to get the money. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be the answer or not. I hope he is.
Yeah.
But at this moment in time, do you just keep him? Do you just cut it? What do you do?
I wonder what kind of strength training he's doing to have that many injuries. And I mean, I know when you take a year and a half off, like you're not going to be when you come back, it's going to be different. The games might have, been sped up for him, whatever. But it seems like any sort of competitive game where he has to make a super athletic play, it always ends up in injury. I don't know if it's just coincidence or if it's just like you were training the wrong thing.
I mean, that's a possibility because we even talked about that with like knee injuries initially. Is that like what's causing knee injuries? And one of them is just strength and conditioning. Um, Another thing too, you have to think about it is this though too. Like people don't just randomly tear their Achilles. There's usually Achilles tendonitis with it before you even consider tearing it. So what I'm thinking happened, and this happens in the NFL all the time, is that you have this high-paying player, right? And you're paying him a lot of money, so you expect him to be on the field regardless of what's going on. He probably had tendonitis for X amount of weeks, and he was trying to do rehab, but since he's getting paid so much money, the ownership's like, you're going to get your ass in that field because we're paying you so much money.
Yeah.
And so it just got to a point that his body couldn't tolerate any more stress. It just tore just like that. I mean, with Patrick Mahomes in 2020 with the concussion, he's the best quarterback in the league in the Super Bowl. He's going to play. That's just the way it is. You're going to find a way to get him on the field, whether it's ethical or not. I mean, that's a different debate, but that's what happens in those big, high-profile athletic events.
Well, it's starting to happen in like college too, because I remember when Tua Tagovailoa in Alabama, he hurt his ankle, and he got a special surgery. Like, do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And they put like, and he was like something that would make guys miss many, many, many weeks. He was able to play the next day.
Yep.
And it's like, what is going on here?
Yeah, and that's crazy. Those are just college kids. They weren't even getting paid at the time with NIL.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just a mess, it seems like right now. But yeah, I mean, there's so much money being thrown around in college and professional athletes that it's becoming a big ethical dilemma with athletic trainers. Is like, this is my recommendation, but the owner who doesn't just cut my check, also cuts their check, is telling me,
you got to do this.
Yeah. So it's like, crap, what do you do? And thank God I'm not in that position anymore. But I know some folks who are, and it's a really, really tough thing for them to be in. Yeah. So it's tough, man.
Is it like you said, they're battling like their morals? Like, hey, I'm doing well with my family right now because I'm getting paid however much they get paid. I'm sure it may not be as much as like, obviously it's not as much as the athletes, but I'm sure it's better than what just any average Joe makes. But it's like, hey, this is not what I got into. This is not what I got into this for. Mm-hmm. Like, is it that sort of deal?
I mean, yeah, like a lot of people think that if you work with a professional team, you're like one of the best athletic trainers or physical therapists or whatever in the region or in the world, right? And that just simply isn't the case. You just knew someone who knew someone who knew someone who got you into that spot. But it's also a bit of a curse too, because you're on call 24/7 during that season. So like if an athlete wakes up at like 2 a.m. and they're like, oh, my back's spasming, they're going to call you and be like, hey, my back's spasming, what do I do? Well, shit, I got to go to your house now and do an evaluation, that kind of thing. And I mean, healthcare workers and professionals, they live very lonely lives because all they do is they're basically living at the facility while in season. And then you get that ethical dilemma too, that like you have this high profile athlete who twisted his ankle. He's getting paid millions of dollars to be on the field. The owner's paying him. He gets paid regardless. So he's like, I want him to be on the field, making me money. So that's where it comes into play is like, what do you do in that case?
Yeah.
Now, what's great about the Cougars is that never happens. So, I can tell Coach Kenny, hey, he's not playing. That's just the way it is. And he's great with it. So are all the other coaches too.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when you get into those high profile environments, that's where it becomes very, very tricky because they want you to basically turn water into wine. And that just doesn't happen in medicine.
Yeah. Do you think Tua Tagovailoa should ever play football again with as many, just as, and you might know about this too. I feel like I see way more knockout concussions than I've ever had before, and I've only lived for 26 years. Probably watched football for about 16. Within my 16 years, I've never seen as many dudes just absolutely get knocked out the way that they are today.
Yeah,
like it just seems like there's one or two a year concussions where it's all like the dude is absolutely lost. And usually it's like a take a high impact after the game. It's like, oh yeah, he has a concussion.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like literally dudes are almost dying on the field. And whether it's concussion and then also I've noticed this in high school too. Everybody has a heart issue.
Yeah.
So do those like we'll start on the concussions first. Like, why do you think so many dudes are just like absolutely getting knocked out? Like, worst concussions I've ever seen in my life.
Strength and conditioning. That's a big one too. I mean, I know that they talked about like, oh, in the 90s, these kids wouldn't survive, if they played ball during our realm. The thing is though, with like those folks in the early 90s, they were doing a lot of strength training and whatnot. Like you had the James Harrisons, you had the Ray Lewises, who were just big, huge guys. A lot of these linebackers now are slim, fast, but they're still strong, just not as big and beefy. So they can't really tolerate like a big hit because they just don't have the mass to recoil the physics from it, if you will. So that's a big thing with that too. Another one too is just, I would say the big awareness with CTE. A lot of people are afraid to play, and if you played scared, you're going to get hurt. Like if you're a receiver going across the middle and your head's on a swivel, like and then you miss the ball, and then you turn your head slightly, and then someone knocks you, well then that's an issue too. So that hesitation to play is another big thing too. And what's really tough about these concussions is that there's no imaging that can diagnose a concussion. You can get an MRI and it's going to look like a normal brain, but clearly they have concussion-like symptoms. You can't even diagnose a CTE unless it's an autopsy. So that's even another scary thing with like Antonio Brown when he got hit from, I think it was Vontaze Burfict. Is that his name? Yeah. There was like a complete switch in personality trait prior to the hit to after he got hit. And I mean, I would bet money that when he passes away and they autopsy his brain, they're going to find CTE as a result of it. And that's just so scary nowadays because it's like, well, how do you diagnose it without doing an autopsy? And you can't diagnose a concussion with an MRI. You just have to look at signs and symptoms. So that's why, like, even when I'm on the sidelines with you guys, if I see someone get the bell rung, I'll do a quick eval. Like, and it doesn't seem like I am. It's like, hey, how you doing, man? You know what time it is? You know where you're at? That kind of thing. And just to get a quick eval, see how they do, and then we just go from there. But there's a good chance that like every single year I've been with the Cougars, probably half the team's got a concussion. Only 5% of them has actually reported it to me because they don't want to come off the field.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing too, is that like we need to protect the players from themselves more than anything.
Yeah. I've heard a theory as well, like the old type helmets were like and I know there's like technology conspiracies everywhere, like, oh, the helmets are more like they have more technology, so guys are tackling more carelessly and not taking care of their head, which there might be a little bit of truth to that.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I don't know, like with the Guardian caps, I feel like I don't know the science behind them. I just know they're supposed to be helping with concussions. Like, why are we wearing for half this, like practices where we're having very, very low contact, but we're not wearing them at games? You know what I mean? Like, and it's just kind of that stuff. It's like, hey, where are we? Like, if we're trying to protect players, it's like, hey, when we go into camp, you got to wear these where pretty much nobody's tackling, just because of how football is nowadays. You have very like even your contact days are very very low contact days than like they were when like back in the 90s and early 2000s. And it's like, but in the game where we can't really control the contact, you're not going to wear them. You know?
And that's the thing that a lot of parents are really hesitant with their kids with like contact sports and whatnot. And I always ask them the question this: would you rather have your kid get hit during practice for the first time ever or in a real live game? You're always going to want to choose practice because then you'll get an idea of, okay, this is how it feels to get hit while I'm running with the ball.
Yeah.
And then you can actually prepare your body for when you do get hit in the real game. And it's just, you got to practice it. It's just like anything. You practice running your routes. You also got to practice getting hit because it's inevitable. You're going to get hit in football if you play in football. And that's the thing, though, is that like a lot of these mandates, I think Illinois did this. I know in Ohio they definitely did it. They give you X amount of contact days for like 2-a-days.
Yeah.
Like one practice, you have 0 contact. The next project, you can have like half contact, like shoulder pads and helmet or something like that.
Shells are pretty much every day now.
Really?
No leg pads.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think you can have leg. So usually if we do legs, it's Wednesdays.
Okay.
So, or Tuesdays or Wednesdays. So I think there's like so we'll have a kid play JV, but the next day he can only be in a helmet, and then the next day he has to be in shells if he can.
I see.
And which is like, I get that because it's like you don't want to play multiple games in a week, but those rules did not exist when I was
Oh yeah, when I was in school, like we had 2-a-day practices. We wore full pads and everything for both practices, and we got hit above and below the belt. Like it didn't matter what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of concerns me to an extent because like if everyone's just focusing on like hitting this area, that's how they teach you how to initially tackle.
Yeah.
But I mean, not everyone follows the rules, and so they're going to try to ankle grab you or hit you from the side to get you down in a real game. If you're not used to that, I mean, that could have some injury implications as a result too.
Yeah, and I kind of go to the boxing mentality, like you have to be able to get punched in the face and able not to get knocked out.
Yeah,
and I feel like the same thing is in football, and I hear from like, oh, well, you don't want to get your kid hurt. I understand that, but like and quarterbacks, and they're always the ones that it always ends up happening to with a season injury after what doesn't seem to be like a devastating hit is because they're not conditioned to take the hit.
Yes.
And so I'm not a proponent of like, hey, put your quarterback back there and just get him smoked every single play.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm all like, hey, there should be at least a time during like camp or whatever, everybody's full contact.
Yes.
And obviously you have to go within the rules and it may not never change, but it's like I feel like, and I like that they have the 0 week where it's like an actual preseason game to where like because we had a running quarterback this year, we needed to make sure he could take some hits.
Yeah,
and he played the entire season we were a primary run team and he was our primary runner. Like,
yeah.
So the fact that he could take those hits and we had days where at camps or so during the summer, something that I like too is like you can do a full 11-on-11 scrimmage in the summer now.
Yeah,
you can only do it. So we went to, this was not last year but the year before, we went down to Roxana or up to Roxana and did a full 11-on-11 scrimmage. And it's like, and then the next day we went to O'Fallon, who's a bigger school.
Yeah.
And did that. And people were like, why are you doing that? Like back to back to back. And it's all like, cause that's live competition. Like, and it's like an actual feel of the game. Cause if I'm tackling my buddy, well, I mean, I wasn't like this because I was a jerk, but I'm not going to hit him full go. If I'm the guy with O'Fallon a town over, oh, he's dead meat.
He's gone.
You know what I mean, so it seems like they're going kind of more away from 7-on-7, and they're letting you kind of be like, okay, you can do full sanction 11-on-11 scrimmaging. It just has to be, I think it's like 40 plays.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can only do 20 offense, 20 defense.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying with that. I mean, I always try to tell people that like. I mean, you can't control your kids not getting hurt. Control is just an illusion in my eyes. So, like, your kid could walk out. I mean, God forbid, of course, you don't want ever want this to happen. Your kid could walk out and get hit by a bus. Your kid can walk out on the football field and be completely fine, or they can get a concussion. I mean, injuries are inevitable in sports. Trying to protect them from injuries. I mean, let's say you don't let them play in Pee Wee football, then they try to play high school ball, and all those kids who played high school ball all played Pee Wee ball. They're already gonna be used to all that contact, and then your kid's just gonna be at a higher chance of getting hurt in general. I mean, when I was in high school, when I was growing up, we played. My mascot was the Hornets. I played Little Hornet football all the way from Little Hornet to middle school to high school, and we had a kid play with us starting his junior year. Good athlete, but the moment he got hit, he was like, "Yeah, I'm done. I'm not doing this." And you just have to get used to that. And if you're not used to that, then you're not going to be successful. So that's the big thing that I always advocate, and I know you do too. With you need to get used to getting hit because that's just the way the game's played.
Yeah, the sucky thing is at some of these junior programs, there's not a lot of good coaching.
That's the thing.
It's like, hey, you guys need to be tougher, so we're going to go helmet to helmet and smash each other. It's like, no, that's not super ineffective.
Yeah, don't do that.
I'm not a proponent of the hawk tackling that came out.
Yeah.
I'm not a proponent of necessarily that sort of tackling, but I am a proponent, especially my linebackers, shoulder position.
Yeah.
Because one, it's going to help you know where your help is, but two, it's also, if you're knowing, hey, I got to hit with this shoulder, it's going to take your head out of the play. Now, and this is another thing, I feel like kids don't work on their neck strength enough. But if I'm meeting a guy in the hole, all right, and the whole thing is across the body, and let's say I'm on the guy's running at me and he's on the right of me, okay, and I cross my body, all his momentum is taking on my neck.
Yeah.
And so it's that's super, super, super dangerous. And so I think they do it because naturally, if you get your head across, you're probably going to try to bite the ball, as they say, and maybe get a fumble. But I try to teach my linebackers, hey, no, you take that on with your right shoulder. Now his momentum's getting hit to your shoulder. Now it goes to your abs and then your legs and then triple the triple extension. I can explode through, but for a lot of coaches, it's no, you got to bite the ball. You got to bite the ball. And one, if I'm going this way, my help's here. My right side, if he jukes, okay, now I got a full body tackle. If I go here, I'm not looking at he sees my head turn. What's he going to do? He's going to cut out. So,
yeah.
That's something that I'm hey, not necessarily hawk tackle, but yeah, why aren't we teaching these kids how to tackle with the correct shoulder? So that's something I did this year, especially with my freshmen and my sophomores. They're but I made the tackle. I said, yeah, but you almost gave yourself an injury because you don't want to tackle with the right shoulder. And so I just think that's something that is worth nitpicking because kids' health is worth nitpicking about.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right with it. And I mean, having proper tackling technique is going to prevent injuries from both sides of things. I mean, I remember when I was the first semi-pro team I worked with, they were called the Ohio Gladiators. And we had a guy who was a big fullback, and he used to call himself Mike Allstott. And he would take the ball, lower his head and shoulder, and just run. Wouldn't even know where he's going, just go straight. And he went head-to-head with this other guy. Bam. As soon as they collided, they both had what's called a burst fracture, which basically means the force went down their spine and one part of their spine just exploded. It just burst open. And so both of them had burst fractures from their low backs, and they were out forever, it seemed like. And it's just that could have been completely avoided if you would have just had good running technique as a running back and the other person had good tackling technique as a defender. So injuries with football, while most of them are preventable if you have good form and good coaching as a result of it. So kudos to you because you're doing really, really good to keep patients out of my office from essentially hurting themselves and having some sort of long rehabilitation program.
Yeah, especially at the linebacker position because you're the guy that, D-line, you're getting hit every single play. Linebacker, you might not get hit one play, you might get hit the next. But your sole responsibility, especially in the run game, is, hey, that guy's already at full force. You got to stop him from going full force.
Yeah.
And so whatever I can do to not to have them, well, obviously I love you, but if not having guys come see you because they're hurt,
sure,
that's what I want to do as a coach. And especially if it's one thing to rehab, it's one thing to, okay, now it's more serious. He's out. So
Yeah.
definitely that's the goal, is to keep guys out of your office as
Sure.
much as possible.
No, I get what you're saying with that for sure, man. Yeah.
And something that I like for you is for that you do is like, hey, for me it was all like, hey, I think we did like 18 appointments or something like that. And you were
Right,
like,
roughly, yeah.
and then it was all like, once we got to like 14 or 15, you're like, hey, like if you don't want to come back, you don't have to. Like you're good. And so, which is something like you don't hear a lot of people say that for people coming in, because obviously every person that walks in here is paying money to get adjusted. So obviously that any person that walks in is helping you, but you're like, hey, if you don't want to spend your money, then like you're good, dude. And so that's something that I kudos to you for that, because like it could be very easy to be like, yeah, we need to do those 4 more adjustments, but you're all like, hey, if you don't have to come back, you don't have to come back.
Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest thing, because my whole mantra is I just want to be able to sleep at night knowing I did people right.
Yeah.
And so if I give you my honest recommendation, regardless of what you do with it is up to you. But as long as I give you my recommendation, I know I can sleep well at night, because that's my biggest advocate. I know a lot of folks, a lot of clinicians who do not sleep well at night at all because they know they're screwing people over. And that's sad, but it happens. So,
Yeah. Well, Doc, it's good talking to you.
Yeah, good talking to you too, man.
Yep. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, no worries, man. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you all for listening.